What's up, Wolverine fans? Jack here, another episode of The Big and Bold. And what an offseason has it been. After having Michigan football's best season in almost 25 years, their top three coaches, Jim Harbaugh, Josh Gaddis, and Mike Macdonald, decided to not use the offseason leading up to National Signing Day to try and improve upon that and use the momentum for next year, but instead decided to use it to try and find new jobs. So definitely not happy about that, but now that my snarky little comment there is out of the way, I'm going to break down what these guys were doing, essentially, and who has taken over for those coaches that have left the program. Michigan has now replaced their offensive and defensive coordinator from last year after going 12-2, beating Ohio State, winning a Big Ten title, and making it to the college football playoff. So with that, some people have tried to say, or at least bring up the question, are the walls kind of coming down for Michigan football? You know, is the program falling apart? And I don't think so. I think that this is a case where you have three guys with their own prerogatives looking to invest in their own personal interest. And that's not a crazy concept. You know, we ask these guys to be Michigan men. You know, you're more than yourself. You know, this is about Michigan, the team. But at the end of the day, these guys are businessmen. I mean, that is what it is. And they're going to do what they think is best for themselves. They give it all they've got. And then, quite frankly, in the off season, depending on the circumstances surrounding themselves on the programs, they may or may not look to find another job. Now, when it comes to Jim Harbaugh, that was the most confusing of them all. For a minute there, we thought, is he using this to leverage a new contract? Is he using this to allow him to use NIL and the transfer portal more? Coming to find out, it looks like he just wanted another NFL job, which is hard to argue with. If that's what he thinks is best for him and his family, then I'm not going to skewer the guy for it. I will say that doing it up until the day of National Signing Day is not a good look for the program. And a counter argument to that, though, is that they've still secured a top 10 recruiting class. So hard to be that mad about it when you virtually had zero decommits over his interest in the NFL. He was fairly transparent. He said he's going to pursue an NFL job. If offered to him, he'll likely take it. And we thought he had an NFL job. Adam Schefter came out and said he's expected to be the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm not going to dive too deep into that because I want to talk about the guys that have taken over at offensive and defensive coordinator. It looked like he was well on his way to getting the job. They brought him in for a second interview, which is a very strong indicator that he was the favorite for the job. But I think in that second interview, a 9-hour interview at that, it looks like there were some disagreements in the direction of the organization, how things were going to be handled. And I think it was a split room for the Minnesota Vikings. There were those that wanted him, there were those that didn't. And in the midst of that second interview, it looks like those that didn't want him as the head coach of the Vikings got their way. But with that, he's now the head coach of the Wolverines, and I think he'll be here to stay for the near future. He's likely to get a new contract. You know, they cut his money in half after the 2020 season, deservedly so, and it looks like he's going to get a new contract, and he'll probably be making in the realm of $8 million a year, I would assume. So he'll probably be the head coach for the Michigan Wolverines the next 3 to 5 years. Said to Ward Manuel, this is the last time he's going to pursue an NFL job. We'll see if that happens. I do think it's very unlikely he's a head coach, though, in the near future for an NFL team. I mean, this was probably a sobering experience for him where he thought there was going to be more interest than there really was for him to be the head coach of an NFL team. Yes, in some ways, not ideal that it kind of feels like the Michigan job was almost his backup plan, but I firmly believe that, he's committed to being the head coach for the Wolverines. He's an older guy now. The NFL is going younger and younger with its head coaches. Technically speaking, he had one great year out of his 7 at Michigan, and it took him 7 years to accomplish the things that we thought he was going to do in his first 3 or 4. So he's here to stay whether you like it or not. At the very least, I think this is the best for Michigan the next 2 years in terms of their prospects of success the next couple seasons. Mike Macdonald, that one's open and shut for me. Easy conversation. left the Baltimore Ravens after serving as their linebacker coach, had a couple other positions for them, took over in his first season as a defensive coordinator, period, for the Michigan Wolverines, and did an incredible job. I mean, Don Brown had virtually the same players in 2019, had a very talented defense, and at times it was there for Michigan, and at times it wasn't. It was a very hot and cold defense. 2020 was an absolute disaster. And then 2021, it's one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. I'd actually say they probably had the best defense in the Big Ten behind maybe Iowa. But regardless, Michigan had an incredible defense last season. Baltimore Ravens let go of their defensive coordinator. Mike Macdonald steps up and has pretty much immediately offered the defensive coordinator job for the Baltimore Ravens. That kind of feels like something that was probably set up beforehand. I have a feeling, there were reports that John Harbaugh wanted Mike Macdonald and planned for him to be their defensive coordinator in the future. Michigan needed a defensive coordinator, and he got to step in and cut his teeth with the Wolverines, and he did an incredible job. So now he gets to go over to Baltimore, likely a pay raise, gets to go from college to the NFL. That's a reasonable transition. That's something that nobody's going to really question, I think. That makes a lot of sense. It makes too much sense, as a matter of fact. Josh Gaddis, on the other hand, is an interesting one. That's a situation where it's a little odd how he left and how late in the game he left. But he comes out and, he communicates to some of those leaders on the offense and says, don't be somewhere you're not wanted. Not the end of the world, anything he said, but it's clear that he has a bit of a sour face leaving the program. Downgrades, taking the Miami position as their offensive coordinator, lateral move. Michigan seems like a top 10 program right now. Miami feels like they're hanging inside the top 25. No, don't get me wrong. It would appear that what happened here is that Josh Gaddis was offered more money by Miami. Mario Cristobal just took over down there as the Miami head coach, needed an offensive coordinator, and Miami offers Josh Gaddis. Michigan didn't look to match that. I firmly believe that the vibe in the Michigan athletic department, the Michigan football team, is that they'll be just fine without Josh Gaddis. And that kind of resonates amongst the fan base as well. Mike Macdonald, it's not just that there's a strong belief that he's a very good defensive coordinator and a strong young mind. Defensively, Michigan loses 7 starters. So there's a lot of concern for the defense next year. But offensively, Michigan brings back virtually everyone for next season. And you have a bit of an outlier where for about 6 or 7 games to end the year, with the exception of the national championship game, in 3 years at Michigan, Josh Gaddis has been a failure as their offensive coordinator. 2019 was a disaster. Not a disaster, but the offense was not what we thought it was going to be in 2019. Coming over from Alabama, former wide receiver coach there. I believe he held co-offensive coordinator duties there as well. But he comes over in 2019. Offense is not working right. 2020, complete disaster. Couldn't run the football. Didn't know who to give the football to. Joe Milton looked terrible and uncomfortable on the field. And then 2021, the first 4 games of the season, they ran on objectively bad teams, and they had no passing game. As the season went on, you had a much better balance, but the passing game was still really never there. Not consistently. But he wins the Broyles Award, and the only people who really seem to care about that are Josh Gaddis and Miami fans. Because in 3 years, you had 6 or 7 games where you were really happy with Gaddis as the OC. But the passing game still wasn't particularly consistent. They were able to get you down the field, partially because they were able to run the ball so well. But I just wonder how much of that was Mike Hart taking over for the running backs, Sherrone Moore taking over for the offensive line. And really, a lot of this, I think, had to do with Jim Harbaugh saying enough of trying to find this speed and space offense that I've been hearing about for 2 years. We're going to run the damn football. And that's when the offense really took flight. And I understand that, there's this argument, Gaddis didn't have a quarterback to work with. Well, it certainly wasn't because of high school recruiting profiles. I mean, Shea Patterson was a 5-star. Granted, he never lived up to the billing of that, but 5-star, couple of 4-stars to deal with in 2020 between McCaffrey and Joe Milton. Neither one was able to, Milton won the starting job. McCaffrey transfers, and then Milton looks like garbage on the field. And 4-star Cade McNamara takes over, has one great game, then takes over in 2021, and has, I'd say, a below-average season. An efficient but below-average season. I don't want to know what he'll do with J.J. McCarthy next year. I truly don't want to know what he would do with him. I'm not saying I'm glad Josh Gaddis is gone. Happy for him. Go to Miami, get more money. Good for you. I hope that for him it is an upgrade. But I'm fine with Michigan going over to a new offensive coordinator. Or should I say 2 offensive coordinators. You look at what Michigan's decided to do on the offensive side of the ball. Sherrone Moore and Matt Weiss are taking over as co-offensive coordinators for the offense. Now, I'll talk a little bit about each guy. Then we're going to go over to the defense a little bit. Sherrone Moore is an interesting one. Came over from Central Michigan, held a couple different positions there. Young guy, he's only 36. Was the tight end coach at Michigan for a couple years before taking over for the offensive line in 2021. Now, co-offensive coordinator. Obviously, the offensive line was phenomenal last year for Michigan. He is a really, really well-liked coach on this staff. Young, energetic guy. I think he's going to take over as an offensive coordinator, either for Michigan or another program one day. But definitely a great coach, great recruiter for them. And then you look at Matt Weiss, and Matt Weiss is the one everyone's really talking about, because as soon as this offensive coordinator spot opened up, everyone started talking about Matt Weiss. Another Baltimore Ravens guy, held a lot of different positions for them from 2009 all the way to 2020. Then he's the quarterback coach in 2021, now co-offensive coordinator and quarterback coach with Sherrone Moore, with Mike Hart running as the run game coordinator. Matt Weiss, known as a very analytical guy. Again, Sherrone Moore seems very player-focused, very energetic. You have a really nice balance going on here, I think, between these two guys. And Mike Hart handling the running backs and run game coordination. I think the offense is in fantastic hands, and I think that the offense, from a talent perspective, is in a phenomenal spot. And I'll say it now and put it down on paper or on YouTube. I think the offense for Michigan this upcoming season is going to be phenomenal. The only concern I may have is that you could have a lot of hands in the pot for this offense, because we know Jim Harbaugh likes to have control of the offense. You've got Moore and you've got Weiss. You've got Mike Hart, and those aren't the only guys, but you got a lot of different hands having various levels of say in what the offense will be. So that's going to be very interesting for next season, but I think that they're in a really good spot. As for the defense, they decided to hire Jesse Minter. He was the defensive coordinator for a season from Vanderbilt, another Baltimore Ravens guy. He was there from 2017 to 2020, held different positions for the defense there in Baltimore. Then again, DC and safety coach in 2021 for Vanderbilt. Don't look too much to that. I'm not going to look so much at, his success or failure with Vanderbilt in one season, because it's Vanderbilt, also with a first-year head coach. But he's an SEC guy. He's an NFL guy. And what it kind of feels like Michigan is going for here, again, another young coach, 38 years old, is continuity. I think that they found something both culturally and schematically that they really liked last season that they want to roll with. That's why you go internally at the offensive coordinator spot. You go Matt Weiss, you go Sherrone Moore. Let them balance each other out. Matt Weiss, of course, a Baltimore Ravens guy too. Minter, Baltimore Ravens guy. He's familiar with them. I think he's going to probably employ a fairly similar system of defense to what Mike Macdonald was doing. Again, the point here isn't too much schematically, because we're not sure exactly what they're going to be doing on that front. We'll talk about that more later on in the offseason. We know exactly what they're going to be rolling out schematically, because I like that stuff. I don't know if everybody does, but they want some continuity here. Again, they want young coaches. I think they want to run the ball but have a lot more input from J.J. McCarthy next season, because I really think it's a safe bet that he'll be the starting quarterback. And they're going to let him cook up next year. The defense, there's a lot of work to do. Minter's got his work cut out for him. Again, losing 7 starters. But they want NFL guys, and they want to implement that culture, that energetic culture with the program. And I absolutely love that. I think that's great for the players and for the success of the program. So ultimately, you look at where Michigan's at heading into next year, and there's still a lot of things to talk about for this upcoming season. Some of the things facing Michigan for this upcoming season. Let me know if you're concerned about the changes of the coaching staff. Michigan made a lot of changes to their coaching staff after the 2020 season, and it paid off. We'll see if changing OC and DC will affect them positively or negatively. I will say that one thing that helps is they have 4 cupcakes to start this season. 4 very easy non-conference games, all at home, before going on the road to Iowa in Week 5. So we're going to know what this team is after the first month of the season. They're going to implement their schemes. They're going to get their play calling down, their signals down, and we'll see how the rest of how it goes. But again, I'm excited. I love all the hires. I love the coaching staff, specifically the offensive coaching staff. I think that their offense is primed to have a phenomenal year to compensate for some of the issues that I think they'll have on defense. But that wraps it up for me, guys. I wanted to talk about the coaching staff a little bit, look at who left, where they went, and who's replacing them. Didn't affect the recruiting class. Again, we'll talk later on about how it's going to affect them schematically. And let me know in the comments what your favorite hire was. Do you like that they went with the co-offensive coordinator route? Do you like the Jesse Minter hire at defensive coordinator? Are you worried about Josh Gaddis leaving? And do you think we're going to need to have appreciated that guy more for his time at Michigan? It'll take a lot of convincing for me to believe that, but it is entirely possible. So thank you for listening, everybody. Keep an eye out in the future, these next handful of months. Think of this like my little coaching staff preview for the upcoming season. I'm also going to do an offensive and defensive preview for the team before dropping a breakdown of their schedule as well later on in the offseason. Going to give you my win-loss predictions for them. So that's kind of the outlook for my Michigan content. If you haven't already, check out my video talking about their Orange Bowl loss to Georgia. Please check out my most recent video as well, talking about the top 10 games for this upcoming season. And yes, Michigan is in there. So go check that out. Thanks for listening, everybody, and go Blue.